Joining us now, Hogan Gidley. Hogan is the Deputy Press Secretary for the White House for President Trump. He's also a special assistant to the president. Hogan, great to have you.
Much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, what a day yesterday, Hogan. I know you've been on overdrive. Got up early and probably still haven't been to bed but an hour or so. So let's go right from the top. The president says, look, I'm not going to sign this thing. Have a nice day. I'm not going to do it. Challenges the House to pass a bill they do, which now is a pathway, right? It's a blueprint because you have a bill and you have the wall funding. Where do we go, Hogan, from here?
Well, you just said it. It's out of the House. And you remember in the Oval Office last week, I was standing right behind Nancy Pelosi when she consistently used the phrase American people, American citizens, all about Americans, but yet her policies don't reflect security or safety for the American people. But she, in that said, there's no way you can get the votes, Mr. President. You don't have the votes. And the president said, I can get it in 2 seconds. No, you don't have the votes. And he said, I can get it in 2 seconds. Lo and behold, he brings everybody over to the White House yesterday, talks to them. They go immediately to the floor and vote it right out with his $5 billion of wall funding. So that was completely proven to be untrue. He obviously had the votes. Now it's in the hands of the Senate. The sad part is we were actually negotiating with Chuck Schumer to get something done until Nancy Pelosi stepped in. I mean, she is the puppet master for Chuck Schumer. It's pretty obvious now because he's basically ceased all conversation with the White House. Thus, we're in a situation where the House has done its job. The Senate wants to go home and take that taxpayer salary and take it right back to their districts and just enjoy the holiday. The president's saying, no, stay in town, do your job, and vote to protect the American people. And what we saw in a watershed moment in that Oval Office conversation were two things. One was you saw Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer say, we want to do everything in smoke-filled rooms, behind locked doors, without the American people seeing it. The president said, no, we want to be transparent. Here's where we are. This is what we need to have a conversation about. And the watershed moment, which is number two, is that an entire political party, the Democrats, have now decided that they are going to stand tough and stand up for hundreds of thousands of people who are here illegally and unlawfully, as opposed to standing up for and protecting hundreds of millions of American citizens. That should shock every person across this country, that someone would rather stand up for people who don't have a right to be here as opposed to those who do. And let's be clear, a lot of the American people, we let in 1.1 million people a year from other countries to become permanent citizens. Included in that America's First policy and those American citizenry are all of those legal immigrants who came in and did it the right way. And so she, Nancy Pelosi, and he, Chuck Schumer, are absolutely standing up for those who want to do it illegally as opposed to those who did it the right way.
It's really unbelievable because now you have a bill that's gone through the House. So under normal circumstances, you've got a Senate bill that the president says he's going to veto that when it hits his desk. So then wouldn't you just go to the reconciliation process and just get a reconciliation?
Well, I mean, he's called for that. I mean, he's called for the nuclear option. He said, look, you know, we need to get these things passed. The American people deserve protection. And what he owns as the president of the United States is the constitutional obligation to protect the people here. He's standing up for those people right now. Democrats are not. Hopefully when the House leadership and other members come over in just a little bit, around 10 o'clock or 10:30, I believe they're going to be here to have a conversation with the president. We'll see where we are after that. But make no mistake, if the government shutdown, a handful of Democrats refuse to stand up to protect the American people. The House has done its job. The president said he'd sign it, and now we have the Democrats saying, we're not coming to the table. Enjoy Christmas and enjoy us shutting down the government.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, America's Godzilla of the Truth. We're with Hogan, Deputy Press Secretary at the White House. He's also a special assistant to President Trump. Hogan, Steve Daines yesterday, Senator Steve Daines, Republican, Montana, said the nuclear option word. And he said, look, you know, maybe we should go to McConnell and say now's the time under some circumstances to get rid of the 60-vote cloture rule so we can get this thing passed and get the government to stay open because we're not going to get 60 votes on the other side. Is that something that you could actually see happening?
It is. I just don't know. That's more for the Senate than for the executive branch. But the president has been clear what he wants and what he needs to protect the American people. Listen, one of the dirty little secrets here is that walls work, and whether you're talking about San Diego, El Paso, Yuma, or Tucson, or Israel for that, you see a precipitous drop in the numbers of illegal crossings, upwards of around 95 to 99%, depending on the place I just mentioned. And they work. And they work so well that all these Democrats now who are hemming and hawing over actually protecting the American people with some type of fencing or wall all stood in the well of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and they all said, you can't let people into this country illegally and then make them citizens. We need a barrier. You can't do this type of irresponsible immigration policy. They all were for this. The only real things that have changed, one is the political calculus, so they think they can get them all as voters. Two is the problem has gotten exorbitantly worse. And three is, which is probably the most telling from them on a political side, Donald Trump's in the White House. So it's very clear they don't want to work with this president to support even the policies they were for just a short time ago.
Look, 2006, they all voted for it. Now they don't because of the person who's behind it, right? The whole thing, Hogan, is so ridiculous. I want to get very...
It's so transparent.
It's so transparent.
Hypocritical. I mean, you see it now, and the world's seen it on full display.
Exactly. So our listeners in Trump world have gone ballistic over this, as you know. And so they want the wall. They voted for it. Now you've got a bill. A lot of people have been calling up today and saying, hey, look, we want the president in the Oval Office to make an address to the American people, explain the situation, and go right to them the way Reagan did or others did. I mean, Obama did that. He was successful also. Just go right, sit down, on camera, national address to the American people. Is that something you guys are looking at?
Sure, we're looking at a lot of options, but let's not forget this president takes his message directly to the American people on a daily basis via social media platforms, of which he has 160 million followers. So he does it. We're looking at all types of options because the American people are now beginning to understand what the president was talking about when he was running for office. And one of the most undervalued things he did as president to this point is actually expose the crisis at the borders that Democrats have been trying to hide now for decades. They told us there was no caravan. They're not going to try and get in the country. They come to the country's borders. They try to rush the country. They attack our border agents. They said, we don't have a problem in immigration. But instead, we let in hundreds of thousands of people that we do catch, and then we just release them into the interior, into the American communities without any paperwork whatsoever. There is a crisis in this country. It's an emergency. And Democrats, for whatever reason, not only just have their head in the sand, but they're standing up for open borders, and they want the borders open, but the government closed. And I don't understand that for the life of me.
They want the borders open and the government closed. Great line, Hogan. Hey, one last question. I know you're short on time. When we talk about the fake news, one of the things that we talk about is the fact that they don't cover good things that are happening. For instance, let me give you a perfect example, then I want to get your comment. Yesterday, Secretary of DHS, Kristen Nielsen, delivered a great speech on an agreement that was made with new Mexican President AMLO in basically allowing the caravan migrants, as they're applying for asylum, those both legitimate and illegitimate, to stay in Mexico, get work visas, and while their paperwork goes through. That's like a great agreement. Why isn't that not covered at all yesterday by anybody?
Well, first of all, the shutdown is just sexier to the media, number one. And number two, if they cover that announcement, which, by the way, is monumental, because you just pointed it out, the Mexican government is now saying, we will harbor the people coming to your country trying to get asylum until their case is adjudicated. Of course, you do know that 90% of those cases are proven to be not legitimate. But regardless, they're going to hold that as at a savings to the taxpayer of billions of dollars, and we lose billions of dollars on illegal immigration. What you have, though, is a Mexican government now taking the stance. We're going to do more to protect our country from illegal immigration than the Democrat Party. Now, that right there should be probably the most shocking takeaway from this, is that we have a foreign power working to protect our citizenry more than one entire political party.
Unbelievable. That about sums it up. Hogan, what's the end game here?
That's a great question. It's up to the Democrats. Only they can answer that at this point. We have stood for the American people. We've stood for American families. And right now, as the Senate prepares to go home for the holidays, I hope they understand what's at stake and what's on their plate. All we need are a handful to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to vote to protect the American people, and then we'll see what happens in the new year. But right now, it doesn't appear as though they're moving that direction, despite the fact, as I've mentioned before, they've all supported it in the past. So we'll have to wait and see what they do. But the president's, he's the best negotiator on the planet. He'll have them all over here in just an hour, or just 30, 40 minutes or so, and we'll see what comes out of that.
Hogan, I know you're busy today. I really appreciate the time. Really want to thank you so much on behalf of our listeners, Hogan, and to yourself and your family and Sarah Sanders and her family. Have a great holiday and a very Merry Christmas. And again, thanks for taking your time to be with us, Hogan.
Thanks so much, and to you and all your listeners, Merry Christmas. Have a safe holiday, and we'll catch you in the new year.